Okay. Good morning, and welcome to the February 2nd meeting of the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Before we get started, there's a few things I'd like to cover. Today, community comment is going to only be during, or will be the only opportunity in the meeting for members of the public to participate. You're allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes about anything that is not on today's agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing. We are conducting these meetings in hybrid fashion, so we'll be able to have comments here in the chambers and then online. If you'd like to call in for community comment, please call 786-496-5601 with a conference pin 880269#. We ask that individuals do not repeat information already presented. Call in if you have new comments or information to bring forward. Thank you in advance for your patience as we work to conduct this meeting virtually. We will hope there will not be any issues, but be assured that if we do, we'll do our best to continue the meeting as best as we can if there are glitches. Okay, so with that, I will call the meeting to order. Ms. Olson, could you please do the roll call?
Vice Chair Jackson.
Here.
Commissioner Risser.
Here.
Commissioner Agnew.
Here.
Terrific. All right, let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is approval of the meeting agenda. Does anybody want to make any changes?
I don't.
Okay, great. So do I have a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
So moved.
I second.
Okay, moved by Member Risser and seconded by Commissioner Agnew. Got to get our right titles on the HRA. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and it passes. Next is community comment. And so if members of the audience want to come forward.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So glad my glasses have stopped fogging up. My name is Hope Melton. I live at 4825 Valley View Road in Edina, and I'm director of Edina Neighbors for Affordable Housing. On behalf of Edina Neighbors for Affordable Housing, I want to express deep appreciation to you, our elected officials, for your courageous support of affordable housing. As you well know, stable, safe, and affordable housing is essential to every aspect of healthy human development. It's essential to children's school performance. It's essential to the city's economic competitiveness and well-being, and to achieving the city's equity and diversity goals. I especially want to praise and thank Edina Affordable Housing Manager, Stephanie Hawkinson. We are so fortunate to have her. Her courage, creativity, energy, and knowledgeable hard work. You know, or you probably know by now, even though those of you who are not new, how complex affordable housing is, especially the financing. So her knowledgeable hard work have enabled Edina to make great strides towards its affordable housing goals. That is to say that the city of Edina has created high-quality, long-term, and well-managed ownership and rental affordable housing for a broad range of household income levels. You may not know that Edina Neighbors for Affordable Housing is a member of a Southwest suburban organization called the Suburban Hennepin Housing Coalition. Thanks to the work of our City Council, the HRA, our outstanding staff, including City Manager Scott Neal, and especially Affordable Housing Manager Stephanie Hawkinson, Edina is a top performer in that coalition. Finally, I would like to say that we would not have that outstanding track record for preserving and producing affordable housing and protecting tenants if it were not supported by the vast majority of Edina residents and businesses. When we hear from the naysayers, the NIMBYs, not in my backyard, and notes, not over there either. It's important to remember that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Melton. And you were so disciplined to do this properly. I forgot to tell people, when you come up, you are given 3 minutes to speak, and just as Ms. Melton did, say your name and address. So is there anybody else in the audience who would wish to speak this morning? Okay. Ms. Bennerat, do we have anybody online?
I have no callers online today.
Okay. All right. I think that there's been enough time. Okay, terrific. With that, we will move on then. And next on our agenda is the adoption of the consent agenda. Now, since, once again, it's the three of us, we're down to not having a quorum of people who were here in December. Do we want to just adopt the 6D, and we'll drop the 3 from the thing? Okay.
And then we'll roll those other minutes onto your February 17th meeting.
Okay.
I think, is that right, 17th? Yeah.
Okay, so do I need to make a motion to amend the consent agenda?
16th, sorry. Yeah.
Is that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I would entertain a motion to adopt 6C of our agenda as the consent agenda.
6D.
6D, thank you.
So moved.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
All right, with a motion by Commissioner Agnew and a second by Commissioner Risser. Is there any further comment? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, any opposed? Thank you. Okay, and we're on to the next step, which is reports and recommendations. Okay, and we have Manager Hawkinson up for this one. Welcome.
Is this historic? Is this there used to be 3.
Good morning. Today I am before you to request a forgiveness of a portion of a loan that needed to be paid back in order to further the work of Homes Within Reach. I start most of my presentations with our guiding principles. Why we are doing what we're doing, why we are bringing forward projects and programs for approval. And some of these guiding documents are the comprehensive plan that, as you well know, was like 182 public meetings, a long process to get this approved. The race and equity report that was created by a citizen-led task force. The council equity statement and our council statement on engagement. So the programs that come before you align or attempt to align with these and other major guiding documents. I also want to give a little bit of background information. On this slide, there's a demonstration of need. On the left-hand slide, it's from 1985 till now. And it shows the growing gap between people that are making minimum wage and the median housing value in Edina. Conceivably, back in 1985, a household of 2 could afford a median-priced home. Nowadays, that is not at all possible. Now, this is not to say that it's bad for housing values to increase. It's just to say that homes that were available in 1985, when a lot of people in Edina bought their homes, are not available to the same people today. The graph on the right is just a 20-year look, and it shows major growth industries, including the public sector, of which I am a part, and what the where wages have been in the growth industries relative to the median housing price and what is needed. And again, in a 20-year time period, the cost of housing the median price of housing has become out of reach for most of the growth industries that are in the city. And this is to point out that when left to the private market, the gap between housing values and your average worker, it's just growing. I mean, and that's good, to a certain extent, but it also does create a more singular type household, which you may want to look at. And it also may cause government to take some action to just preserve some, not all, some of the homes that are in the city. So today we're talking about WALT, who does business as Homes Within Reach. WALT is the West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust. They are a nonprofit-based organization that creates and preserves affordable home ownership opportunities for working households in suburban Hennepin County. They have been around since 2002. They are not a new, untested organization. They have been around. We are working on the 21st year of them being in existence. They are in 14 suburban communities. They had their first home in Edina 16 years ago in 2007. They have been around for a while. For many of those years, we financed them with our block grant allocation, which, as based on that first slide, it used to, the 1 year allocation was able to help them buy one home. Now it takes 2 or 3 years of our block grant allocation to help them buy a home, which is why we have increased our support of them to be able to do more than one home every 3 years. So they have been active in Edina for 16 years. They have 24 land trust homes in the city right now, but their portfolio contains 196 land trust homes. They are not a small organization that is just testing the waters. They have helped 225 families in suburban Hennepin County. So on the right is a resident in Edina who bought their land trust home in 2010. So again, 13 years ago. And I want to point out that they said, as homeowners, there's a compounding, rippling effect in our stability and confidence that continues to ground and grow relationships in almost every aspect of our lives. We plan to retire here and pass our land trust home on to our children, which I think is most people's dreams when they buy a home in the city. So the land trust model, to give a refresher, is how does it work? So a house is sold to a buyer, but the land, the ownership of the land beneath the house is maintained by the land trust, a nonprofit organization that is governed by a board. The organization enters into a 99-year ground lease with the homeowner to have use of the land on which their house sits. Part of the ground lease includes a resale formula. So the homeowner can maintain 35% of the equity in their home. This allows for the home to remain affordable and become increasingly affordable relative to the market rate prices of homes for 99 years. So it's a long-term affordability. Homes Within Reach, they're pretty selective of the homes they buy. They want homes that are going to be solid and stable for these households. They want them in well-established neighborhoods with strong schools and where people can really set down their roots. So the program outline that we have here is we entered into this partnership, and this enhanced partnership was to preserve home ownership opportunities for low and moderate income households, retain community wealth and home ownership wealth, enhance residential stability, preserve long-term housing affordability, preserve the homes as well as the households, and it serves working households with incomes between 60 and 80% of area median income. And to translate, this is about $82,000 a year for a family of 4. So in 2020, we decided that the block grant allocation of less than $100,000 a year now was not sufficient to really help this program and move it along and to preserve the homes that we are losing at a rapid pace. And I don't mean that's disparagingly, but some people were concerned. So in June of 2020, we awarded a $1.3 million line of credit. Due to the popularity of this program, we augmented that with $2 million additional dollars a year later, for a total of a $3.3 million line of credit. Of that, $960,000 was to be returned to the HRA. And it was supposed to be returned because the homes are sold. Someone is buying the homes, and so there's proceeds. The land stays with the nonprofit, but the house, they get revenue from. And so our idea was that we would recapture the sale of those homes. And so here they have 10 homes through this program. One of the 10 was supported with the block grant funds. And so on the right is the budget thus far. We, though, are essentially out of money for doing more homes with once they return that $960,000. So I'm asking for forgiveness for them to be able to use that $960,000 to do at least 4 more homes. And that in and of itself may not be enough to do the 4 homes, but there are the block grant funds, there are Met Council funds, there are Hennepin County funds. So this would be bundled with other sources of money. But it would leverage those other sources and allow for more homes to be preserved. Because I am still getting calls from folks who want to sell their homes into this program. So typically, what would happen is Walt would go, or Homes Within Reach, would go out and search for a home, often off a list of people that have called me. They would submit the request to funds to us. They would purchase and rehab the home, sell to the homeowner, and then the sales proceeds would return to us. Again, that is what I'm asking for forgiveness, to allow them to keep those sales proceeds and funnel it in to the acquisition and rehab and sale of future homes.
So, you know what, I'm going to go back to that slide. I just want to clarify something. This is a one-time forgiveness of loan of the $960. We're not creating a new automatic thing. Okay.
This is a one-time forgiveness of the $960 that is due back to us. I'm asking for it to not be due back to us.
Okay, just
I'm
I wanted
asking
to
for them to be
clarify
able to
that.
maintain that, roll it into future homes.
Okay, just this
Just
one
this one
block
time.
of funds. Okay, great, thank you.
So since 2020, when this program, the line of credit, was approved, 9 homes were bought with these program funds. I mentioned a 10th because that one also used the block grant funds and all our other partner funds. So there's been 10 that were bought since 2020. The house is sold for roughly $200,000 to the homeowner, which clearly means that there's a gap. And then we place the value of that gap into the land. 6 of the homes are now owned and occupied by families with young children. 3 are under the process of being rehabbed. There's a 7th, again, that's the block grant funded home. So the people that have bought these homes, we have researchers, educators, utility workers, a chef, family advocate. We have people that wanted to move near their grandparents for childcare. We have folks, families that wanted to move into Edina and send their kids to the schools that serve the Edina school children. Supporting this program complies with multiple comprehensive plan goals, and it also complies with goals and strategies set forth by the Housing Strategy Task Force. And these are included also in the staff report. That's the end of my presentation, and I'm here for questions. And we also have Brenda from Homes Within Reach is here for questions as well.
Terrific. Ms. Lana Walk, do you want to just introduce yourself to the commission, please?
Hello, my name is Brenda Lano Wolke. I'm the Executive Director at Homes Within Reach. We are located in Minnetonka. I am a resident of Victoria, Minnesota.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much for being here this morning. So, commissioners, do we have Ms. Agnew?
Sure. I'd love to start with some questions. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation this morning. So my first question is, what would this $960,000 be used for if it were paid back to the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund?
Chair, Commissioner, that's a good question. The funds came from our Affordable Housing Trust Fund program. They would go back into that fund. We do not have an earmarked use for them now. Those funds have been used primarily to support single-family opportunities. We finance this program, the $3.3 million out of that. We finance the home rehabilitation program from that source of funds. The NOAA preservation was supported through that funds, through that Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We have tried different creative ways to help support and further affordable housing in the city when there are not other traditional sources of funds, primarily focused on single family. So it would most likely go to another single family type program.
Thank you. And then my next question related to that is, and I understand that this is like a Hennepin County kind of entire area program. Do we know if any of the $960,000 that will be used to now purchase future homes will go towards homes in Edina, or do we not know that yet?
Oh, commissioners, all our money, their Black Grant money, our 3.3, that line of credit, we track it. It stays in our community. There is no cross-pollination of other cities' programs.
Thank you for that clarification. And then, given that we do have so many different programs that we're working through out of your leadership here in the city, I'm curious if you have an assessment on, the return on our investment across the different programs that you've been working with, to kind of give a level set on why you think this one is such a great one for us to be continuing to invest in.
Thank you for that, too. One reason why I like this program is the 99-year ground lease and the continual affordability for that time period. So when houses turn, they remain affordable. They do not flip. They do not get torn down. They do not become market rate. They stay within this program to serve future families at an affordability level. So even though the cost per home at a snapshot in time is fairly high, if you spread that out over 99 years, and by then the home probably will need a lot of work done. It is, I think, a good value. Furthermore, since Homes Within Reach is always there when there are issues with the homeowners, if they need a new roof or a furnace, all that is addressed in the initial rehab, but eventually anyone who owns a home knows that there's big costs that lurk around the corner. They help direct them and guide them through that process. So they're there as a backstop for these households that is an added benefit to the homeowners.
My last question then, thank you for that. So if there were a family who was in one of these homes and down the road they were in a position to acquire the land, say after they pay off their mortgage, is that something that they could feasibly do to repackage the land with the house and take over complete ownership, or is that not a possibility?
Commissioners, that is not a possibility. If they are in that financial position and they want to own the land under which their home rests, they can, and things have worked out for them, job changes, whatever their life situation, they can move on and buy a home on the open market and take the equity that they get from this home, apply it towards that new home, and then own the land under their home. But the idea of this is to create enduring, in these homes that are acquired, long-term enduring affordability and preservation.
Wonderful. That's what I hoped, so thank you for that.
That was correct.
Terrific. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Risser.
I can't help but think about Grandview Lane and the houses there that are currently more affordable than what you would see if they were torn down. And I keep thinking of that metric that on the open market, when you have a tear down and a rebuild, it's usually 3 times the cost of what you have to pay to get it. And so just thinking strategically, and I don't know, you probably can't answer this because you don't know where the next 4 houses are going to be, but it seems this could be a way to mitigate tear downs along entire blocks where you already see the homeowners who are there trying to maintain their homes and keep those homes there, which is more of a comment than a question, I guess. But I would love to get follow-up information just in terms of where all the houses are located in Edina and how you do the rehab so that you can maintain costs so low. And I don't know if I'm new, so I just wanting to learn more about the program. But it seems like all of the pieces are there to introduce a level of stability in terms of our housing market. So again, not necessarily a question, but a comment. And if would it be possible to kind of
Yes, we can share
shatter?
more information with you. Currently, when we purchase a home, what we're looking for is that home structurally sound. We don't want to deal with issues where we have to deal with a bad foundation. When we come in, we're looking at health, safety, and energy efficiency. So most of the homes, because of their age, need to have insulation put in the walls and the roofs. We replace the roofs, we replace the windows, we do the siding, we put in all energy efficient appliances, upgrade the electric and the plumbing. Many times we end up doing some of the cosmetic work in the inside, but if that home is structurally sound and we do not need to do the cosmetic work, we feel the homeowner then has an interest in and a vested ability to come in and do the painting. So I don't need to pay a contractor $5,000 to paint the inside of a house. The homeowner will come in and do that. Our goal is when our home buyers buy these homes, within the first 5 to 7 years, they shouldn't need to put any money into their home. And we work with them and talk with them about building those reserves so that when they do have a repair that's needed, they have some of their own cash, but then we're also there, as Stephanie had said, to help them locate the resources and the funds available through either Edina or through other nonprofit organizations or the state for low-interest loans or grants if they income qualify. The home that you saw on the presentation was over on Monroe Avenue. That home, the homeowner had lived there for 47 years. She was a single woman. She had not done anything to the home in 47 years. When she went into an assisted living facility, her daughter, who lived 3 doors down, contacted us and wanted to have the home come into the program. We purchased that home. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath that had not been touched again in 47 years. We came in and did all the things that we said we would do, and we ended up finishing off that basement because it was unfinished, putting in an egress window, making another bedroom downstairs, adding another bathroom. So we made that home a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. The family we sold it to, it was a single mother who is a teacher, and she really wanted to live in Edina, but her sons were very active in sports in the Hopkins School District, and it just so happened that that home was perfect. It was Edina where she wanted to be. It was the Hopkins School District, so her kids didn't have to move. She was a first-time home buyer. She had been waiting 12 years to purchase a home. So that's the stories we have.
Thank you. I would love to see like before and after images of one of your projects.
Wonderful. We
Okay.
can share that with council. I'll get it to Stephanie.
With regards to where the homes are located, we sent out that postcard, Not for a Teardown, a few years ago, and that has elicited the 50 calls that we've received from people interested in selling their home. So it is often based on who calls us and says, we're selling our home and we want to sell it into this program. We're not interested in getting top dollar. We're not interested in getting into a bidding war. We want this home preserved. So those are we work off of that list. And so it's voluntary sellers, people who want to sell their home into this program. And then Brenda and her team go and look at the homes for the reasons that she stated. So some have been passed over. Foundations were crumbling. It was 1 bedroom for whatever reason. But there's no targeted acquisition. It's really who comes to us because they're voluntary sellers.
Is that all, Commissioner? Okay, terrific. Thank you so much. So I think everybody's asked my questions, which is great. I guess I just did want to talk a little bit more about the supply of homes, because I remember there were quite a few calls when we sent out the postcard, people interested in participating in this program. And it sounds like we're continuing to get people calling in. So this is pretty recent information. Is that correct? Yeah, okay.
Correct, that is correct.
All right.
I received a call, I sent you one earlier this week, right? I think on Monday.
Okay, terrific. So that's wonderful. Well, thank you, Manager Hawkinson, for this detailed history. I really appreciate that, because we have to remember, not everybody goes to all these meetings and hears it, so it's really wonderful to be up that history and the policy behind our actions for the general public and for us as well. So thank you for that. I guess just to go back to Commissioner Agnew's question, this is your top priority for the use of these funds. Is that fair to say?
Chair, Commissioners, I don't know if we would say it's my top priority for these funds. These are how I feel. I was given the charge when I was first hired to figure out how we can address single-family affordable ownership. And for 2 years, I racked my head trying to figure out how we address this, how we crack that nut. And the partnership with Homes Within Reach made sense to support it. There are not a lot of sources of funds to help with single-family ownership. We have, for multifamily, there's tax credits, there's MHFA, we have a variety of sources. Limited funds, competitive funds, not a shoo-in for those multifamily, but there are other options. There are fewer options for single-family ownership.
Okay, so I guess to rephrase it, obviously it's our decision that we're going to make, but you don't have things in the queue that would have to be pushed back farther on the list by making this decision. You don't have 3 upcoming programs that are going to need funding that would compete for these funds.
I will be coming forward in 2 weeks with another single-family program that is also in partnership with Homes Within Reach, bringing in another player that will be using some of these funds, but that's already been taken into consideration.
Okay, so not competing for this $960,000. Okay,
correct.
Thank you.
That is
yes,
correct.
Commissioner Risser, you have a
Have
follow-up.
we ever worked with Habitat for Humanity and, just thinking about...
We have a crystal ball. In 2 weeks, I will be presenting to you a program in partnership with Habitat for Humanity and Homes Within Reach. It's a 3-way partnership.
Good idea.
Thank you, Commissioner Risser, for that.
Yes. Terrific. Does that prompt any other comments?
Yes,
Yeah.
it did. So I have one more question. So as I understand, right, and if you could even pull back up that slide, I'm sorry, there's kind of like a circular flow that kind of, I think, describes the way, thank you, where a house is purchased, we go through the rehabilitation, we then sell it, and obviously it's split, but then some of those proceeds then from the house should go back into this fund.
Correct.
And so as I understand, this $960,000 was money that was, we invested before. It came back based off of home sales. And so now what we're asking for is, instead of paying back this loan, put it back into the funnel so that we can buy more houses with it. We'll forgive this as a loan. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct.
Okay. So then the question is now, kind of in a way, right, this $960,000, sure, some of it will kind of be lost throughout the funnel as we go through rehabilitation and things like that. But we'll never have to re-forgive this portion of it again, right? Like, this is now a part of the flow where once these 4 houses ideally are bought and sold, then those proceeds will continue through this funnel.
Yeah, that's good.
I think I understand your question. Chair, Commissioners, what we're able to do in the last couple years is have them not borrow money from a bank that would be interest-bearing for them to be able to do this program to help the money go further. They may need to do that with this 940. This 940, when there's sale proceeds from a home, that may need to be used to pay back borrowed funds elsewhere. Instead of paying back we were the bank. And so instead of paying back our borrowed funds, this 960 would now become the permanent gap piece that stays. Is that me? Okay, no. That stays in the land, and the sales proceeds would go to pay off borrowed funds elsewhere. So this would be, when this 960 is expended, it's expended. It will not be coming back. It will not be recycled any further. It will help with 4 to 5 new homes, and then it's done.
And the rest of that gap is also a loan that's outstanding, so if we get proceeds, again, we'll have the option of forgiving a loan, or?
There will be no forgiveness. This will be the final level of forgiveness. This money will become permanent gap. Other sources, that, in order to do the 4 to 5 homes, they will need to use funds from Met Council. They'll need to use funds from their line of credit with their bank.
Okay.
And they'll need to pull in other sources to be able to do these funds. So ours would be placed in the land and in the rehab, and the sale proceeds would go back to pay an outside loan that they need to borrow in order to get these homes done.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. That clarifies it. So, all right, any further questions? All right, well, thank you both for being here this morning. It's very exciting. And Mr. Lindgren, you are up, I believe.
Is there action?
Oh, that's right. We have an action on
We're
here.
seeking it.
So can I have a motion to approve the forgiveness of previously awarded funds to West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust doing business as Homes Within Reach?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion from Commissioner Agnew, a second by Commissioner Risser. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Thank you. We got a deal. All right. So now, Mr. Lindgren from Dorsey and Whitney.
Yes, good morning. I'm going to do a quick introduction.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Bill Neundorf, the city's economic development manager. As you know, one of the main charges of the HRA is focusing on redevelopment. And in that effort, we work with a variety of different types of developers, commercial, industrial, residential. And while most projects in Edina are privately financed, from time to time, this body does consider public financing portions of those projects. When we do those evaluations, our internal staff certainly takes a lead, but we rely heavily on outside professionals that have expertise in Edina, in the region, throughout the country, with both private and public financing. So while we have some time together this morning, I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce you to Jay Lindgren. He is one of our leads on these efforts. And before we have a big proposal in front of you that has a lot of questions and decisions to make, we thought it'd be more appropriate to do kind of a soft introduction. So Mr. Lindgren has prepared a brief presentation that he'll run through that describes his services and how he approaches projects in Edina when we are his client. And then, of course, he's available for questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Lindgren.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neuendorf. Chair, Commissioners, good morning. Again, I am Jay Lindgren from the Dorsey & Whitney Law Firm. My practice is focused almost exclusively on public finance, municipal law, and land use. I represent a number of communities throughout the metro area on exactly the topics we're talking about today. It's been my good fortune to be a legal advisor to the city for, I'm not quite sure, but something like 15 to 20 years. Also, on a personal note, I've been an Edina resident for nearly 30 years, so I thank you for your service. It's a great, well-run community. So why public financing for private development? And again, I don't want to be here today to be a salesperson. My goal is maybe to be something of a teacher and just at least leave you with some important nuggets about the kind of topics that might come to you from time to time. So I like to think that there are times when the city and a developer have a shared vision. There's something that obviously is important to the private sector, and they want to make money and they want to do things, but it also brings some other kinds of public benefits to the city. And so that shared vision might include a project that costs more money than the market will bear. You'll hear often we talk about the gap. And what the gap is simply this, is that normal sources of equity and financing, but when you put in these public elements, these public benefits, whatever they may be, they wind up that the project is more expensive. So Minnesota law has a variety of tools that can help you help you fill that gap if you choose to do it. Another thing I often like to say to policymakers is that when you're sitting as the city council, you clearly have an important regulatory role in the land use. That you know what that is, you're experts on that, you have experience in that. There's other times then, well, maybe, especially in the HRA, you want to be more of a partner because you want to help achieve that shared vision. So what I want to do today is to talk about how this team that Mr. Neuendorf talked about, how we look at what that financial gap is, how we test it to make sure it's real, how we find options that might be able to fill that gap, and then bring those options to you. So why do these gaps occur? First of all, I like to think of what we're talking about as land recycling. You know, we all know that it would be cheaper to incinerate garbage, but there are important benefits of recycling, so we spend the time and the energy to recycle. Well, the same thing happens with land. So I use the term, is it a gray field or a green field? The reason I use that term is we know what a brown field is. That's a horribly polluted site. And a green field is something that doesn't exist in Edina, but it might in an ex-urban area. A gray field is this kind of underutilized, you know, not to pick on the old strip mall, but think of the old asphalt and all the rest of it. And so just the fact that you have to eliminate that existing kind of blighted condition, that's the biggest thing. The other thing in these projects is that it may require new infrastructure, including infrastructure that has a public benefit that might solve some other city. So it kind of becomes the developer's cost, but there's also a larger public benefit. Certainly affordable housing that you've heard about, while you have a policy that requires it, it also can sometimes make a great project that much more expensive, so there might be a reason to think about doing that. And then there are times like the one that we're in now, where there are market conditions that are unique, rising interest rates or other things that might otherwise throw off the timing of a project, but because you have this shared vision, you say, no, you know, this should happen now. So those are some of the reasons. Some of the tools then that are available, and the one that we talk about the most, and I'll talk about the most today, is tax increment financing. And in very simple terms, tax increment financing is as simple as this. In that gray field condition, this is the tax assessed value. This is how much taxes it's raised. If you build something new, the value goes up and there's an incremental difference. Minnesota law allows you to capture a portion of that. And the important thing from a public policy standpoint is Minnesota law gives you, as city elected officials, as HRA commissioners, the authority to also capture the incremental taxes that would otherwise go to the county or to the school district and a few other small. Okay, so that means you're given by the state legislature the role of deciding whether or not these incremental taxes for some period of time should be used. Tax abatement is similar, but it only deals with the city's portion of the taxes or the increase in the tax value. It works a little bit differently, but the reason that tax abatement is a less common tool is because it generates less money. In other words, it captures the city's portion of the increased taxes, but not the school district and the county. And obviously there are lots of important policy questions about the fact that you can control these other growth in taxes, and that's probably for another time and a place, but that's why we talk about increment, because it does because it generates more money. There are also certain grant programs. They're not quite as robust as they used to be, but that is something your team always looks at to see if there is some condition that in this gray field can be remediated through a grant program. The most typical of those is when there's some kind of environmental condition, but sometimes there are other tools available. So in Edina, the tools you typically consider, and as I say, are on in the area of tax increment, and I'm hesitating because it's always easier for me to go way too deep into the weeds on this because it gives me goosebumps, right? Right, Madam Chair? We have a little public financing history together. So, but having said that, I want to at least leave you some nuggets because you will hear different terms over time. So a redevelopment TIF district is for what's called the most blighted property. That means that there is a significant amount of the buildings in the area cannot be remediated without or brought up to current code specs without spending more money than it's worth spending, in simple terms. That tool allows you to capture the increment for 25 years. There is also a tool called a renovation and renewal district, which allows you to capture the increment for 15 years. That's if there is sort of less blight, okay? Again, I could get into all the details on the percentages and so forth, but that's the overview. There's also a tool, the Housing TIF District, which Edina uses, which isn't about remediating something. It isn't about getting rid of a gray field. It's about creating something, which is new affordable housing. A housing TIF district, though, it's important to note, is really truly for affordable housing. You need to have, there's a couple different standards, but in essence, the funds have to be used only for folks that are at 50 or 60% of the area median income. And so it's a flexible tool, but it's hard to use if you have affordable housing combined with some other problem you're trying to remedy. So housing districts tend to be just for a specific affordable housing project. Again, I mentioned the grant sponsorship. What I wanted to mention here is because these other governmental units might have monies available which ultimately flow through to a private developer's project, but the city is the intermediary. The city's the sponsor, so it becomes a part of our contract to say, you go out and find these grants, we will help you get them. And a newer program that the city's started using a little bit more is a forgivable loan, which is there, if we can find a source of money, we will say, if you go do something and you perform the way that we've agreed you will perform, the loan is forgiven. If you don't perform, it's repayable. And so it's more like a grant program. Obviously, you have to have a source of funding and all that, but that's another tool you might see occasionally. So who's your team? And I just wanted to, obviously, it's the folks here, Mr. Neal, Ms. Hawkinson, Mr. Neuendorf. I also wanted, because he can't be here today, for you at least see a smiling picture of Nick Anhut from Ehlers. Ehlers is the city's financial advisor in all aspects of public financing, but Nick is the one that really understands what that gap is, how to quantify it, how to test it. I like to say he's the numbers person and I'm the words person in this part of the team. I also wanted to introduce you to my partner, Alex Selke, who you may see from time to time. We work closely together as we try to deliver the final product. So the typical steps, there's a lot of words on this slide, and this is probably the guts of what it is that you want to know about, but this is driven by the developer. The developer controls the site. The developer starts the land use approval process, again, wearing your other hat as the city council. The developer then will say, I can't build what everybody wants to build for this dollar amount. The city has a policy that has to be followed. There's an application process, so this is all very transparent and open. I think it's an important thing for you to know that at that point, the developer has to make a very significant deposit with the city. Your third-party expenses are reimbursed by the developer's deposit, even though your advisors clearly only work for you. So I think that's a very fair and level playing field. Then we start to do the vetting and analysis. So this becomes the important thing, to have a developed project pro forma. These conversations really can only occur once a project is pretty well baked. So they aren't kind of pie in the sky. That's why I think they have to move parallel with the land use approval project, because we have to get to the point that we have pretty sound construction estimates and things like that, so that you can have a detailed pro forma. And what that pro forma in essence says, and not to repeat myself, but okay, in a typical marketing setting, here's how much equity a builder has to bring in, a developer has to bring in. Here's how much financing is available. And then on the other side, here's the well-developed set of costs. And is there a gap? In many ways, it's as simple as that. So, especially with Mr. Anhut at Ehlers, we look at that pro forma. We use comparisons to other projects. We look at whether or not the returns that they're looking for, the fees that they have baked in, are those market rate, those kinds of things. Then with that, we try to do creative problem solving to say, okay, yeah, that's real. Now, how do we solve it? We don't automatically go to tax increment if there are other ways to solve it, but usually these kind of projects, the gap's big enough that increment is the only tool that will actually get it done. And then this category of public benefits, I think, is really important to understand on a couple levels. First of all, that Edina has a very long history of wanting to make sure that this isn't just a subsidy to a private developer, that there's something returned to the public in advance. So your team is always focused on, frankly, making a list. What are the public benefits? The other thing I would say, and again, not to get into the weeds, but Minnesota law would allow the use of tax increment for things that don't include public benefits. I mean, just to say it bluntly, you could pay for the bricks and mortar of a private building. Edina won't do that, okay? So you have greater authority under state law than what you typically, based on your policy decisions, have decided. So I just wanted you to know that. I'll talk more about managing risk by the type of the tool, but the thing I want to leave you with is that this is all intended, and our goal always, and we usually achieve it, is that this is essentially as close to zero risk to the city financially as you can get. Everything has risk, right? But I'll talk a little bit more about that. The goal is that the financial risk to the city is only this promise of increment and nothing else. Then process-wise, your team does all that. We put together the basics of what this deal would look like, present it to you in a term sheet. Again, not more for your direction to say, okay, I see where you're going. I agree, I disagree, keep going, or stop. So there's a check-in point before there's anything detailed or obligated or anything like that. Obviously, there are lots of procedural steps. I won't go through them all right now, but the creation of a tax increment district, for example, takes actions of both the City Council and the HRA, and all the scheduling and the proper notices and are done and are developed. You'll hear from time to time about a huge document that's called a redevelopment agreement. That's the end product of what we produce. That's what the words part of this team focuses on. And, you know, it can be hundreds of pages long, but that's the document that says, okay, here's what you're going to do, and we're going to be partners, you know, for potentially 25 years. Here's everything that has to happen. Here are the criteria and so forth. So that's the big document that comes out of the term sheet. But even when that's done, and assuming you approve that and agree you want to move forward, the work isn't done because the construction is monitored, and any use of public financing doesn't occur until after the construction is done. Okay, I mean, there are some exceptions to that, but that's really the idea here, is that you're promising that if there are incremental taxes, because you, developer, built this thing, when we know you built it, and you built it all the ways that the redevelopment agreement said you would build it, then the increment can start to flow. So it's really a reimbursement tool, if you will. I talked about control mechanisms and the TIF note, and as I said, the TIF note is typically issued after construction. So we have a redevelopment agreement. As I said, if you built this, then we will issue the TIF note. I just wanted to talk about why it's called a TIF note. I mean, you know, I use the term so much that it becomes secondhand. But as a tax increment financing note, what you, the city, are saying is called a note because you're making a promise to the developer. But all your promise says is, again, if you build this and these incremental taxes are created, we will transfer those revenues to you, those dollar amounts to you, usually twice a year as taxes come in, and you have to use them for all the qualified purposes that are established in the redevelopment agreement. So that's why it's called a note. It is a promise from you, but it's not secured by anything or anything else. That usually happens after what we call a certificate of completion. Now that's different than, again, wearing your other hat. There's a certificate of occupancy when something's safe and it can be lived in or it can be used. You know, building officials will say the construction's done. A certificate of completion is that you have met all the criteria in that redevelopment agreement. Okay, so you have a great deal of control here about have they done what you wanted them to do. And the other thing is when there's a certificate of completion, we have another control mechanism that we call right-sizing the note. And that is we look again at that pro forma. Okay, it was prediction, here's that gap. What did that gap actually turn out to be? And so we look again, and we have a mechanism to say, no, you know what, that we won't increase it at that point, but we have a tool to decrease it. Or, for example, say additional grants had come in and made that gap smaller, the note would go down. So there's another point at which that goes. The other term that you'll you'll hear, and one of the nuggets I wanted to leave you with is pay-go. So that's really a term we use when a tax increment note is pay as you go. So that means as those taxes are paid twice a year and all the other criteria are followed, then a check will be issued for that amount. In other words, all the risk is on the developer. The developer, you've made a promise you'll deliver the money, but the only way the money gets delivered is if that increased valuation has occurred, and now they have that note that they might be able to use for financing, or they might carry it, but pay-go is a very limited obligation of the city. I might just take a second to talk about tools that are also available that Edina typically doesn't use, because you could take that tax increment stream and make it a part of a bond, for example, okay? There are two kinds of those, just to know the term, that are rarely used but are available. And one is called a tax increment revenue bond. And so now the tax increment revenue bond says this predicted revenue stream of increments is enough money to the marketplace to say, okay, we'll give you that much money because we know that the revenue will be flowing. There's no further promise from the city, but it's different than a note because now the city has issued a bond. It might not be a bond that counts toward your debt limits or anything like that, but you're more of a player. You're more of a participant. There also are tools that are very rarely used, but sometimes used and sometimes should be used after a few years into a project. They're what I would call a general obligation tax increment revenue bond. What that means is that now the tax increment is flowing, and maybe there's a financing advantage for a city to say, you know what, if those revenues ever are short, you will use your general obligation, which is your taxing authority, to make up the differences. Now the risk profile's changed. Now you're a participant. Again, I have never helped structure one of those for the city of Edina, but I wanted you to know that they're out there. And again, and I don't want to sound like I'm selling, but you take a very conservative approach to the tools that are available to you, and I think that's a good thing. A couple more things as I try to wrap up here. A tool we also have as a control mechanism is what we call a look back. So not only do we look, once that project is done, as I said, we resize the note if necessary before the note is issued, proving up that gap again. But then we also say, you know what, we get to look again. And it depends on when it is, but after a few years, if it's an apartment building and it's operating, we might come in and look at what those revenue streams are, or if there's a sale of the property. And if the amounts of profits that were originally baked into the overall pro forma and the agreement are much higher, we get to right-size that note again, okay? So that's a look back. The other term we sometimes use is a clawback, which usually when you have a look back, if something, and the goal is to never have this happen, right? But I want you to know the tool is there. But sometimes if the look back shows that there is are profits that were higher or other returns that were higher, we'll just shut off the note. A clawback is to say, you know what, you got too much money and you owe it back to us. That's the one that is hard to enforce, or not necessarily hard to enforce, but would take additional effort. So our goal is to have that tool available but never have to use it. And then I've talked to some about this idea of public benefits and what those might be. Those we create the legal documents to make sure they always exist. So for example, a new apartment structure might have a plaza in it. And I'll give you an example of this quickly as I wrap up, but might have a plaza in it that then the public could be invited to. Well, we record an easement against that plaza to say that forever the public is invited to use it. It's not a handshake, it's a legal document. So those kinds of tools are also available. So just in conclusion, let me just quickly talk about a project that we all know that, you know, is a few years old, that is the recreation of 49th and a half Street, or Market Street, into what it is now. I just remind everybody, and I know you know this, but this essentially was a street that had city-owned parking ramps on it to serve the 50th and France area. You can see the old picture of the one that was on the north side, or excuse me, the south side of Market Street. And in this case, the city was interested in seeing what it could do to redevelop those parking ramps. One was old, needed a lot of work, was expensive, and so forth. And the HRA had a piece of land that it could bring into the piece, and you solicited proposals. And the developer brought forth what we see now. And in this case, we started with the gap. And again, there were debt and equity requirements to build what was this common vision that created a gap. And in this case, there were a variety of solutions, but in simple terms, at the end of the day, it was a $10 million tax increment node on, and I don't remember, but a $90 or $100 million project or something like that. And think about the public benefits of the Market Street project that probably would have been taken out of the project without that. Then make your judgment whether it was worth the money or not. But I'm sure you all know the public plaza that's there, where there are occasional public concerts. That all has an easement on it that the city, the HRA, has in essence an ownership interest in that. So that's a part of what you get there. There are the walkways, the Woonerf that created behind the existing buildings and those buildings on the south side of 49th. This was one of the first projects that was, I think, a 10% affordable. It was even before your policy, if I'm not mistaken. And so tax increment was used to help create that affordability in that project. And there are a few other things that happened, including the ability to coordinate construction and things like that, because you almost doubled the size of that north side ramp to serve the community. All that came through that redevelopment agreement. So with that, I've done a lot of talking, but hopefully I've left you with some interesting and valuable information. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Lindgren. Commissioner Brisser.
Just a quick one, because I need to get to TIF training. But it strikes me, and I keep thinking about this, the makeup of the city council is exactly the same as the makeup of the HRA. We are both regulatory and a partner. Is this something that happens in a lot of other cities?
Yeah, Mr. Kendall could add to this too, but basically, I could give you a history of housing and redevelopment authorities and economic development authorities, but it would take too long. But the long and the short of it is that an HRA has a different set of tools than a city does. A city can decide what the governing board of the HRA is. I would say most cities have their elected city council members also serve, but there are also cities that you can set up a different process, and you might appoint people to it just like you would on a planning commission or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it can be either one.
Okay.
Anything else? No. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Agnew. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindgren. I would love to geek out on this. Just so appreciative of your... It's fascinating stuff, and it's always such a reassurance to know that we've got outside legal counsel looking at this to make sure that we're doing this legally, that we're exercising the powers we have properly, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, terrific. Okay, so then we are to executive director's comments.
Mr. Neuendorf, how much do you want to cover of this today?
This can take 2 minutes or less.
Okay.
So under the executive director's report, there's just 3 updates we wanted to make sure that were in front of you. So I don't have any formal report or any formal presentation, but just wanted to remind and alert you that staff is currently talking with the developer about tax increment financing on the vacant commercial property at 7200 to 7250 France Avenue. That project has gone through the initial stages of the Planning Commission and City Council for zoning, and now they're working on their financing. So we expect to be back in front of you as an HRA in either late February or early March with a recommendation and proposal. So I just wanted to let you know that is happening. The second item, Scott, if you don't mind, the bylaw review. So each year we review the bylaws of the HRA, and if there's any need for changes, we recommend changes. We have reviewed the bylaws and find no need for changes, so none are recommended at this time.
So, Manager Newendorf, I have a quick question about that. If the public wanted to read the bylaws, where would they be able to find them? Just contact you, or is it on our website?
It's at edinamn.gov. If they search in the toolbar or in the search bar, it should be on there under
HRA
HRA.
bylaws, yeah.
Okay, terrific, thank you.
Yep. And then the last item in the report is just a forecast of upcoming activities. Commissioner Risser already looked into her crystal ball for a Habitat for Humanity proposal coming up. But again, just a reminder that the reason we meet and the reason we meet separately is because we expect to have several projects coming up this year. We are in discussions with Orion on the 7200 site. We continue to monitor the 70th and France site, where the U.S. Bank branch is just about finished. We might be coming back to you later this year with a few amendments to that agreement. The financial markets have changed quite a bit in the last 30 days, let alone the last 6 months, and so we want to make sure that we can be responsive to the needs of the market. We're also in conversations with Hennepin County about the Southdale Library site. So further discussion will be coming up on that. No imminent action, no decisions at this point, but just to let you know that that is moving again after several years of being on hold. And we're also hearing that some sites in town, some commercial sites are under contract with new owners, and usually what that means is redevelopment for some of these sites. So we don't have any details, there's no proposals, but just to let you know that staff is keeping our eyes and ears open on a few projects, and if something comes up, that we will get you updated at that time. So just wanted to let you know that there's plenty to work on this year in the redevelopment scheme and the housing scheme. So more to look forward to. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you, Manager Newendorf. Anything else?
That's all we have for you today.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners' comments? Commissioner Agnew? No? Commissioner Risser? Okay, well, terrific. Well, thank you, everybody. I don't have any comments either this morning. It was lovely to see everyone. Fun to have people in the audience. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Agnew and second by Commissioner Risser. Any further comments or discussion? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.